Coming up, we've got the second and final part of my conversation with Rodney Overstreet about burnout and PTSD in the healthcare space and what he's doing about it. If you haven't listened to the first episode, make sure you do that first because it leads directly into the start of today's show. And if you'll recall, we were discussing hypnosis and its place in healthcare. Now, let's dive back in. Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. I'm curious, too, because there's often pushback with these kinds of things in actual clinical settings because we're so, like it's Western medicine, not hocus pocus, not magic. And so a lot of these kinds of, alternative ways to do things, they're not utilized when they could be in conjunction with the regular Western medicine, and it takes me back to an old Scrubs episode where they were going to do a procedure on a patient. The patient wanted no sedation, no pain medication, whatever. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to do hypnosis. And the resident was really excited about it. And we're going to do all this and that. And and as soon as the knife hits, it's like, okay, well, duh, because there are certain things that you're not going to have. Not every tool works for every situation.
That's correct.
But a lot of times they have to be melded together. And
for sure. Layers.
Yeah. When you layer them together, they have an incredible effect. So
that synergism, that entourage effect of bringing lots of different things to the table. And, sometimes people are going to reject one thing or another thing, and that's okay. So you push that one off the table. Maybe you bring another thing on the table and see how that works. But that directly applies to healer healers, because when I first began to think about these terms and I began to see that cloaked creature that moves among our professions and that's causing the damage. And then I started, like I said, identifying things inside of me that work. So I have layers of things that work. So non-negotiables are like sleep. Every single human being needs high quality sleep. And so I found this term sleep hygiene. I had never thought about sleep hygiene in 35, 40 years. That was a foreign concept. But now I'm very intentional about my sleep environment, about noises, about making sure that I have good boundaries with the family and they understand, the kids at 10 o'clock, if you're studying or whatever, you got to be quiet.
Yeah.
I've also implemented earplugs and an eye mask so that if I want to sleep in on the weekends, I'll pop those in and put the eye mask on, and that helps me protect myself from them living their lives. I would avoid caffeine after about 2 or 3 o'clock in the evening. And then I knew that nature helped me. So I started trail running again, fell in love with mountain biking. I love nature photography. I love collecting arrowheads and hunting for fossils and just being in the dirt. And so then I found the benefits of gardening and growing things and how that can benefit a human being, and actually digging in the soil and getting soil underneath your fingers and how just interacting with the earth can be curative and helpful. I had started meditating about 12 or 14 years ago. I visited the Bala temple here in our town, which is a Buddhist temple. It's secular for the most part, and began to understand meditation. And so I revisited meditation and I read Dan Harris's 10% Happier and started digging into that. And I realized what a therapeutic modality that was. And so that's another one of my non-negotiables, is that you've got to spend some time with yourself.
Yeah.
I advocate Vipassana meditation, which is just people watching you. You're the people, and you sit quietly and you dispassionately observe your inner monologue, dialogue, list maker, storyteller. And the metaphors I like for that are, we're chained to this drunken monkey our entire lives, and you can't get away from the drunken monkey. And so you have to entertain the drunken monkey, and the monkey loves the breath. So you say, monkey, watch the breath. Recently, another teacher talks about the shitty roommate that we live with. And this shitty roommate's constantly berating you, criticizing you, just making your life difficult.
Yeah.
And you have the ability to see this roommate and say, why don't you go, Netflix in this back room and, eat some chips and hang out. I'm going to take care of things up here. And that's a metaphor for our ego. Our
Mhm.
ego, like Freud talked about, is always trying to protect us. And that's also a metaphor for the inner child, which is another aspect of who we are. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Dang, man. It's obvious you've done so much work on all of this.
On
And
me.
yeah,
On me.
on you. But like, hey, it's one thing to do all this work on yourself, but it's another to bring that information to other people. And you decided to start a Facebook group to help others and have a web page. And, so what is it that you're actually working to accomplish with Heal Our Healers?
So whenever Matthew and Rigo sat down with me and talked to me, they used a great analogy. They were talking about they got tired of pulling people out of the river, right? So we stand by this river and people keep coming past us in trouble and we keep trying to fish them out of the river. I certainly want to fish people out of the river. Like, I'm not going to leave the side of the river. I'm going to keep walking that river and pulling people out, right?
Mhm.
That's my goal. I want to do that as a dad. I want to do that as a husband. I want to do that as a member of my community. I want to do that as a member of my hospital with my team that I work with. When somebody's got in deep water, I want to help them get out. I want to do that with myself. But ultimately, I want to start moving upriver and finding out why people are falling into the river and stop that. And
Mhm.
so ultimately, that's my goal. What does that look like in reality? That means, number one, teaching individuals to pause, take a break. Viktor Frankl talks about this in Man's Search for Meaning, is that between stimulus and response is true agency, but we get lost. Ever since the first single cell creature developed a light sensing organ, whenever a shadow passed over it in this primordial ocean, it would scurry under a rock, right? So stimulus response. And that's what we're stuck in our lives.
Mhm.
We aren't awake. We aren't aware. Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now says we should wear a watch, and the watch should just say now in really big letters, NOW. That's the only moment that we have, and that's where all of our agency lies. And so if I can tell people one thing, it's just learn to pause, learn to take a breath, go to the breath, the big deep abdominal breath. Because that big deep abdominal breath, when somebody cuts you off in traffic, when a patient's starting to desat, whenever your boss tells you, before you leave this afternoon, I need to talk to you. When you walk in the house and your wife looks at you and goes, I need to talk to you, learn to take a breath. Big deep abdominal breath through your nose if you can.
Mhm.
And then that one moment and that one pause, agency begins to open up. This expanding space that you can just sit in for a second and have some agency, and you can think and you can relax and be peaceful just for a minute. And this is mindfulness. And then in that space, you can take a couple more deep breaths. Let your abdomen flow way, way out, big belly, as you continue to stretch your vagus nerves and afferent signals to your brain to rest and relax and repair instead of getting caught in your sympathetic nervous system. You're not fighting, you're not fleeing, and you're not going to freeze. You're mustering more agency now. Now we're talking about Wim Hof. We're talking about box breathing with the Navy SEALs. We're talking about the yoga pranayama, right? We're collecting energy inside of ourselves.
Mhm.
We're stealing ourselves. We're restoring ourselves just with the breath, just with the
Yeah.
space that we've created. And then we can begin to critically assess the situation. We can think of the most positive things to say, the most positive things to do, of not judging ourselves, becoming aware of our inner narrator. So if we have the monkey mind that starts to scream, I'm in trouble, I'm going to lose my job, my wife hates me, I'm no good, we can say, I see you. I acknowledge that you're there and you're attempting to protect me and help me in some really messed up way, but I'm going to just let you watch the breath. I'm going to put you in the back room with the Netflix on and some chips. And I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to grab the wheel of this ship and I'm going to pilot this thing and I'm going to figure it out. But I'm going to maintain my peace, my calm, my serenity. I'm going to stay in my place of gratitude and I'm going to stay in my place of hope. And if you're a religious person, I'm going to know that, God never gives me anything I can't handle. Or if you're a Buddhist, you're going to say that I'm suffering right now because I'm trying to make the world different than it is. I just need to accept what is right now. Or if you're a Muslim, you can talk to Allah or whatever your spiritual beliefs are. You can begin to utilize those, and those are going to give you strength, and those are going to give you resolve, and those are going to give you peace and help you calm down further. And then you can navigate your way, navigate your day And then you can start picking tools out of the toolbox and go, I'm really stressed right now. What I probably need to do is go take a walk. Or I'm really tired right now. I think I just need to take a quick nap.
Mhm.
Or everything feels super heavy. So I just need to go out to the pool or the lake and just swim a few laps. Or I'm really sad right now and I need to tell my partner I'm really sad and I just need to cry. I just need to let it out. I've got this huge ball of anxiety and of fear and I see it and it's not controlling me and it's not taking over me, but it's really heavy right now and it feels like I'm going to just burst. My chest feels tight, my neck feels tight. I can feel a headache coming on. These are the physical manifestations of the suffering inside of ourselves, and we're managing and we're doing a really good job. But like Bessel van der Kolk says in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, the body keeps the score. There's a reason you're hurting. You're hurting because your body is trying to find a way out of the internal turmoil, the internal pain. So it's trying to manifest it physically. And instead of reaching for a Percocet or an Oxycontin or muscle relaxer or the heating pad, maybe you just need to cry. Maybe you need to talk to somebody about it. Maybe you need to unload it, call your pastor, call your brother, call your mom, and just talk about things. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot there. I mean, and it's obvious that you haven't made this journey on your own. And you mentioned a couple people there, Rodrigo and Matthew, who, you and I kind of mentioned before we started recording.
Yeah,
There are a couple of people who have been influential for you. You have a couple of team members with Heal Our Healers who are
yeah,
obviously influential in your life. So I'd love it if you just tell us a little bit more about them and how they've been a part of your life.
for sure. Thanks for asking that question. So first, I would like to shout out to my wife, Shannon Easter. She's a writer, and she's my writer. She's my copywriter. She's my editor. She's my webmaster. She's literally the wind in my sails. And if I hadn't met her after my divorce, I would not be in the position that I'm in now to do what I'm doing, because she allowed me the space and the inspiration to follow this dream. When I first started trying to put this thing together and figure out how to structure it and understand it, I had this booming, thunderous voice in my head that said, what gives you the right? This is our inner talk. This is just real talk. What gives you the right? Who are you? You come from a broken family. You were, an abused kid. You don't have any psychological training. You're too busy. What if this costs money? You don't have extra money. All these things. What gives you the right? Who are you? You're nobody. And so I voiced those to her, and she was very loving and very caring and very supportive. And she told me that I could do this and to follow this dream. And she's been right there with me the whole way. And so she is my co founder. She's one of the main reasons that I'm emotionally capable of doing this work, because, again, doing this work puts me at risk for compassion fatigue
Mm-hmm.
because I've got this group of people who reach out to me sometimes privately, sometimes just on the Facebook group. And so I'm carrying some vicarious trauma, some vicarious burden just from doing this activity. And I was already tapped out before and not in a good place emotionally. And so the only reason I'm able to do this is because I am in a good place emotionally. I do have all these tools. I do have the ability to interocept. I do have the ability to use my vocabulary so that I can be fluent on my suffering when I'm suffering. And she helps me through that. Next is my friend Nick Berry. Nick is my chief recovery officer. I lean on Nick for problems with recovery. He's active in the recovery community here. He is the co-owner of my gym that I work out at here in town. It's called OTM Fitness. And high intensity interval training is one of my major modalities of managing my chronic stress and anxiety. Because there's something about getting out of breath and suffering physically for me that helps me masticate my anxiety and my stress and my trauma. Like, it literally breaks apart those things that are inside of me that are attacking me and chews them up. And then it helps me to metabolize that and to excrete it. That's the only way that I can say it. If I suffer, if I get out of breath, if I get my heart rate in the 160s, 180s, if I get so depleted that I'm like laying on the ground, which CrossFit's a great way to do that, then I just feel better. It creates a beneficial biological milieu in my brain with endorphins and oxytocin and serotonin. And so I feel better for 24, 36 hours, 48 hours after I do the workout. So Nick's been powerful in this journey. He was one of those individuals that I talked about that had to seek some help. And so he helped wake me up to this problem. And then Ron Eislinger, my hypnosis coach and mentor, he's been tremendously impactful on me as a human being and on the way I think about life, the way I think about my inner narrator, the way that I'm aware of my inner dialogue and the way that describe myself, the stories that I attach to myself. I'm very careful about the labels that I attach to myself. I'm very careful about the language I allow others to articulate and describe me as. If I'm feeling comfortable with the way that, my brothers are talking to me like old stories, I tell them, I'm not going to acknowledge that. I'm not going to interact with that anymore. So he changed the whole way I thought about the world. And now I'm beginning to grow closer to Rodrigo and Matthew, and they've invited me to the Provider Wellness Symposium again this year. If you guys didn't attend last year, I highly recommend that. And as far as I know, it's the only thing of its kind out there. And it's 2 days, 2.5 days of intense workshops and experientials that deal with recovery from trauma. It's all about healing. Last year, they had James Nestor, who wrote the book Breathe, as the keynote speaker. That's a fantastic book just about learning to breathe properly and what breathing properly does for your body. And we had workshops with Wim Hof breathing. I led a Qigong workshop. I did laughter yoga. Ron did hypnosis, self-hypnosis. There were so many fantastic teachers there. They did yoga, walks in the garden, all these wonderful things, all these wonderful modalities. And so I really appreciate those guys and what they're doing, both together as a team and individually in their own pursuits.
Awesome, man. Well, I do want to give some other actionable stuff. And one of the things I found when I visited your website was the toolbox. So what is the toolbox and how did you figure out how to develop it?
That's a good question too. So once I started working with real life individuals who were in crisis situations, suffering from vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout, I began to ask them questions about what worked for them. And, it was surprising because things that worked for them did not work for me. Like, one person, one of her modalities was watching sad movies, and she would just cry and she would get that out, because she didn't feel comfortable with other people, but she did feel comfortable in the comfort of her own home. And so that, and while that seems preposterous to me, one of the ways that you can self-care is just, if you're an introvert or if you're shy and you're just not comfortable reaching out to others, is kind of indulge yourself in some of those things that evoke the emotion that you need to bring forth, and then allow that to unfold, in its completeness, completely feel the feelings. But that was one thing that began to emerge, is that people have to feel the feelings. Like, we have all this stuff locked up inside of us because we're taught to keep a stiff upper lip. We're taught in the operating room, never let them see you cry, which
Mhm.
is true. Like, in the operating room, you really shouldn't. But when you get home, it's okay. And so I began to understand that people can access these isolated, sequestered emotions inside of them through a multitude of ways. One of my friends is a really educated yoga teacher, and yoga is one of her primary modalities. So that movement, that meditation and movement, and moving those tissues, feeling the stress and the trauma in the tissues unlock and open up, and it allows it to flow out of her. Sleep is another thing that I came across that was widely acknowledged as being one of the things that you have to do. Another thing that I'm starting to talk about that not a lot of people talk about is how important sex is. It's really important to have that release. Sex is a fantastic way, just like high intensity interval training is, of releasing and unlocking these beneficial chemicals inside of our brains and making us feel good. And so that doesn't mean it has to be with another person. It can be with yourself in a healthy and safe environment. But that's a really beneficial thing that you can do to help you relieve some of your anxiety, relieve some of your stress. And if you just haven't felt good in a long time, then that's a way to make yourself feel a little bit better, a little bit lighter. It's been proven to help sleep, increase the depth of your sleep. I met some people who were really strongly into Stoicism, and so I began to study Stoicism. Ron Holiday's books, if you're interested in Stoicism, because philosophy is a powerful modality for individuals who aren't super spiritual. There's a large portion of our society, especially Western society, who aren't ultra spiritual, ultra religious anymore. And if you need some frameworks to lean on, I think the Stoics are a very beneficial school of philosophy to study, because the Stoics teach us that we are the masters of our domain, and that we are in control. Even whenever the storms become strong, we're capable of standing at the helm and driving our ship into calmer waters if we have the courage and the fortitude to do so. And I find that very empowering.
Mhm.
And some of the other activities that the Stoics talked about that people have benefited from is intentional suffering. If you have anhedonia, one of the major symptoms of depression is anhedonia, hedonism, pleasure. You can't feel pleasure. You're incapable of feeling pleasure. Life just hasn't seemed pleasurable for a really long time. I'm just going through the motions. Well, the Stoics understood this and they came up with a remedy, and their remedy was intentional suffering. So they encouraged you to sleep on the floor, on the rocks, on the floor, the cold, hard rocks. And let's say you don't live in an old house with cold rocks on the ground, but I promise you that if you sleep on the floor with a sheet for a couple nights, the moment you slide into that cool, warm, comfortable bed, whatever it is, soft, snuggly, you're going to feel pleasure. You're going to reset your point of view from where you were. If you were experiencing massive anhedonia, if you go run a half marathon or just get through it as well as you can, let's say you can't run it, you run, walk it. Or if you go do the new thing that people are doing, the 12-hour walk, where you just walk 12 hours with no music, no technology, but you spend 12 hours in one day walking. When you stop walking and you come home and you have a meal and you get in your chair and you turn on the TV, you're going to see what pleasure is. If you, like I've been doing, I've been fasting for gut health and mental health and reestablish my relationship with food. Do a 36-hour fast, do a 36-hour water fast. And the whole time you're doing that 36-hour water fast, just think about your favorite food that you're going to eat whenever you can eat again, whenever you break that fast. And that anticipation and that delayed gratification is going to build inside of you so that when you do engage in that eating act, in that refeeding activity, you will feel the pleasure that you haven't been feeling in a while. And so there's dopamine fasts that you can do that people advocate. There's cold water shock therapy, which a lot of my friends do in the CrossFit community. There's sauna experiences where you push your body hard in a sauna at 104, 105, 100, 110 degrees. So there's all these different ways that we can reset our brains, that we can reestablish relationships to pleasure that we haven't had in a long time. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I know that for me personally, because I'm not highly religious, Stoicism was something that was like an eye opener to me.
Yeah.
And Ryan Holiday's books were instrumental to that.
Yeah.
Ego is the enemy, the obstacle
Yeah.
is the way.
Ah, yes, yes, right. The obstacle is
Which,
the way.
yeah, I love
If you
that
can
one.
look at it like that, if you can be thankful and grateful for your obstacles,
Yeah,
what a blessing.
yeah, and that is absolutely the way that Stoics looked at it. Because again, back then philosophy was a way of living.
Yeah,
Religion was like, hey, I need to sacrifice this goat so that I can have rain for my fields. It wasn't this morality play that it is
yeah,
now. So it was refreshing to me to find, a moral way of living that was not tied to the dogma of religion. Uh,
yeah, 100%. Buddhism
so,
Without Beliefs is another great book too. If you've never read that one, Buddhism
oh,
Without Beliefs.
interesting. Yeah.
I
So,
mean, Buddhism is a philosophy. It certainly can be a religion, but as a philosophical framework, it is fantastic. And Taoism, Wayne Dyer's book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life,
yeah.
was absolute transformational. I would be negligent if I didn't say Wayne Dyer was not a part of my awakening to my own suffering too.
Yeah. Well, I know we've got to wrap up here. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, if people weren't taking notes, I'm going to put a message at the beginning of this that people need to break out their notepad ahead of time, because you've just been dropping bombs here. But, I want to make sure that people can get a hold of you and reach out to you to find out more information about you and your journey and Heal Our Healers. How can they do that?
Yeah, the number one way is to join our Facebook group. It's Heal Our Healers on Facebook. It's got an orange banner. And if you're not on Facebook, just open up a fake account and get on there. I teach guided meditation there. I do some laughter yoga. We do some debriefing sessions. I constantly am posting, and the community is posting articles that they come across and inspirational quotes. And the biggest thing is there's a community of over 2,000 people there who are there for you. It is a hive heart. You've heard of a hive mind of like the internet. This is a hive heart. It's a group of compassionate, caring, loving caregivers. And if you've had a hard day, if you need some love from a community, it's just a great place to say, hey, I've had a rough day, so and so, and I promise you'll get some good feedback there. You can also visit our website, www.healourhealers.org, and learn more about what we're about and the toolbox. And you can see where I'll be speaking next. But please join the Facebook group. Invite all your friends and family who are clinical healers, whether they're, like I said, dietitians or transporters or nurses or RNs or LPNs or physicians or MD PhDs or social workers or clinical, or I have clinical clergy there.
Mm,
And it's a great place for us to utilize the internet for what it was made for, and that was to make humanity a little bit better instead of just arguing and bickering.
yeah. Dude, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show today and
Thank you
and
for having
just
me, Bobby.
sharing, your experiences, your knowledge, your journey with us.
My pleasure, man. I really hope that you and I can continue to talk and connect on things. And if you ever have any questions or problems, or if you need some support, please reach out.
Absolutely, buddy. I appreciate it. This was such a powerful conversation for me personally. Rodney is just a completely authentic dude, both on and off the camera. But he didn't get there overnight. It's taken years of self study and self care for him to get to this point in dealing with his own life's trauma. And he truly attacks this with a passion, as evidenced by his dabbling in so many different sciences and religions, and Eastern and Western medicine to find his own answers. And what that shows me, and what many of us do already know, is that the work is really hard. And there is no cookie cutter, one size fits all solution to the problems of PTSD and burnout. Everyone comes into their role as healthcare provider with their own background and baggage. Unpacking that baggage can take years or a lifetime for some, and professional help or counseling is only a part of that solution. Most importantly, though, healthcare providers are often so hard on ourselves. That empathy and compassion that we show to others in the clinical setting, yeah, we pretty much often avoid showing that to ourselves. And in my off camera conversation with Rodney, he tapped in immediately to some of my own negative self talk, and he noticed my need for self love. And I swear that I've been working on those things before and since then. But what I took from that is that my work isn't close to being done yet. And that's okay. It's why there's so much need for a supportive community like Heal Our Healers, where we can be our authentic selves and gain confidence from others who help lift us up along the way. I'm excited to see what Rodney continues to do in that community and his own life. That's going to do it for today's show. If you'd like to reach out to Rodney and learn more about Heal Our Healers, make sure you check out the show notes for his contact info. This is Bobby Jones signing off. Until next time, stay safe and take care of each other out there. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.